In Tokyo, a family of four pays about $30 a month for gigabit internet. That's 1,000 megabits per second of download speed, fast enough to download an entire HD movie in under a minute. In New York City, that same family pays $150 a month for half the speed. Same service, same technology, 5 times the price. And here's what makes this even stranger. Japan is a mountainous island nation where laying cable is objectively harder and more expensive than running it across flat American suburbs. Yet somehow, they've managed to build one of the fastest, cheapest internet infrastructures on the planet, while Americans are stuck paying some of the highest prices in the developed world. This isn't just about internet bills. It's about a business model so profitable, so entrenched, and so brilliantly designed that it survived decades of public outrage, government hearings, and technological revolutions that should have destroyed it. The average American household spends over $1,800 per year on internet and cable services. That's more than they spend on electricity, more than their water bill. And the price keeps climbing, up 19% in just the last 3 years, while the actual cost of delivering internet has plummeted. So why are you paying 5 times more than someone in Tokyo for worse service? The answer isn't what you think. And once you understand the hidden machine behind your internet bill, you'll never look at that monthly charge the same way again. Most people assume American internet is expensive because we're a big country with lots of rural areas that are costly to connect, sparse population, long distances, expensive infrastructure. And on the surface, this makes perfect sense. Of course it costs more to run cable across Montana than it does to wire up dense Tokyo neighborhoods where millions of people live within a few square miles. But here's the problem with that explanation. American internet prices are just as high, sometimes higher, in dense urban areas as they are in rural ones. Manhattan residents pay an average of $140 per month for broadband. So do people in downtown Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Francisco. These are some of the most population-dense areas in America, where the cost per customer to deliver service should be minimal. Meanwhile, South Korea, another country that had to wire up mountains and islands, offers gigabit internet for around $25 a month. France averages $35. Romania, $10. Even Canada, with vast wilderness and freezing conditions that make infrastructure harder to maintain, comes in cheaper than the United States. The geography argument falls apart the moment you look at the actual numbers. So maybe it's competition, right? Perhaps other countries have more providers fighting for customers, which drives prices down. That's basic economics. Except here's where it gets interesting. According to the Federal Communications Commission's own data from 2022, 83% of American households have access to only one provider for high-speed internet at their address. Not two, not three, one. In areas where there technically are two providers, those two companies mysteriously never seem to compete on price. Comcast territory stays Comcast territory. Charter stays Charter. AT&T stays AT&T. They've carved up the map like mob bosses dividing a city, and they respect each other's turf. This isn't an accident. This isn't the free market. This is something else entirely. And the explanation for why this exists, why your internet bill is designed exactly the way it is, goes back to a single decision made in a Washington, D.C. hearing room 40 years ago, a decision that created the most profitable legal monopoly structure in American corporate history. To understand your internet bill, you need to go back to 1984. Not because that's when the internet started, it's not, but because that's when the monopoly infrastructure that controls your internet today was built. In 1984, the US government broke up AT&T. For decades, AT&T had been the telephone company in America. One company, one network, total monopoly. The government decided this was bad for competition and consumer choice, so they shattered AT&T into 7 regional Baby Bell companies. At the same time, cable television companies were exploding across America. Companies like Comcast, Time Warner Cable, and Cox were laying coaxial cable into neighborhoods to deliver TV channels. These were local monopolies too, but they were regulated differently. Cities would grant one cable company an exclusive franchise to wire up the town. In exchange, the company had to agree to certain service standards and price caps. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Those cables that brought you HBO and MTV in the 1980s, those are the same cables that bring you internet today. When broadband internet became a consumer product in the late 1990s, cable companies didn't have to build new infrastructure. They just had to upgrade the cables they'd already spent billions burying underground. And that's where the trap was set. In 2002, the Federal Communications Commission made a decision that changed everything. They classified cable internet as an information service rather than a telecommunication service. This sounds like meaningless regulatory jargon, but the consequences were enormous. Telecommunication services like old-school phone lines were classified under Title II of the Communications Act. This meant they were treated as common carriers, like railroads or electric utilities. If you owned the infrastructure, you had to let competitors access it at regulated rates. The government could control prices, force companies to share networks, ensure universal access. Information services had none of those requirements. With a single classification decision, the FCC handed cable companies total control. They owned the cables. They didn't have to share them. They didn't have to let competitors use their infrastructure, and they could charge whatever the market would bear. Michael Powell, the FCC chairman who made that decision, argued this would encourage competition and innovation. He believed that if companies weren't burdened by regulation, they'd invest more in infrastructure and prices would naturally fall. That's not what happened. Instead, cable companies realized they had something better than a monopoly. They had a government-protected monopoly with zero obligation to share and zero price controls. They had become the railroad barons of the digital age, except this time there was no Teddy Roosevelt coming to break them up. But the origin story is only half of it. The real genius, or the real trick, is how these companies turned that infrastructure advantage into a money-printing machine that extracts maximum profit from every single customer. Here's how the business model actually works, and once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere. Step 1. Control the territory. Comcast serves 32 states. Charter Spectrum operates in 41. AT&T and Verizon cover different regions, but here's what's crucial. They almost never overlap in the same neighborhoods. They don't build competing infrastructure where the other company already has cables in the ground. Why? Because building parallel infrastructure is expensive and pointless when you can just not compete. If Comcast owns Philadelphia and Charter owns Los Angeles, they both get to act like monopolies without technically being one national monopoly. Legally, they're separate companies. Practically, they operate as a cartel. In 2023, Comcast reported an average revenue per customer of $158 per month. Their actual cost to deliver that internet service, the marginal cost of you using their network, is estimated at under $10 per month. The cables are already in the ground. The infrastructure is built. Sending data through those cables costs almost nothing. That's a 93% profit margin on every customer. For context, Apple's profit margin, one of the most profitable companies on earth, is around 26%. Google is 30%. Internet service providers are operating at margins that would make drug cartels jealous. Step 2. Eliminate choice through strategic mergers. Since 2000, there have been over 1,200 mergers and acquisitions in the telecom and cable industry. Comcast absorbed AT&T Broadband in 2002, Charter bought Time Warner Cable in 2016 for $78 billion, AT&T swallowed up DirecTV, then Bell South, then Warner Media. Every time two companies merge, the FCC approves it. Every time they promise it will improve service and lower prices, every time the opposite happens. After the Charter-Time Warner merger, customer bills in former Time Warner markets went up an average of 17% within 2 years. When Comcast tried to merge with Time Warner in 2014, even the merger-friendly FCC said no. It would have given one company control over 57% of American broadband customers. That was too much even for them. Step 3. Deploy the pricing trick that hides the real cost. This is the psychological warfare part. Have you ever noticed that internet service is never just a price? It's always a promotional rate. $49.99 for 12 months. What they don't say loudly is that after 12 months, the price jumps to $89.99, then $110, then $140 as they slowly add fees: broadcast TV fee, regional sports fee, modem rental fee, installation fee, service activation fee, convenience fee for paying your bill online. This is called drip pricing, and it's illegal in several other countries. You advertise a low price to get customers in the door, then gradually increase the real cost over time. The customer doesn't leave because switching providers is either impossible, there's no one else, or so annoying that it feels easier to just accept the higher bill. The average American customer stays with the same internet provider for over 6 years. That's 6 years of steady price increases, often without any improvement in service. Now, think about this for a second. If you're a cable company executive, what's your incentive? You have no competition, your customers can't leave, your costs are fixed and low, your only job is to raise prices as much as possible without triggering a regulatory response. And this is where it gets really interesting, because there's another layer to this business model that most people never see. Step 4. Bundle to obfuscate. Internet providers don't just sell internet. They bundle it with cable TV, phone service, home security, mobile plans, products that nobody wants separately anymore, but that allow the company to hide the real cost of internet inside a $200 triple play package. When you call to cancel cable TV because you only use Netflix, they offer you a deal. If you keep cable, we'll lower your internet price. Suddenly your bill shows $60 for internet and $80 for cable, when really it's $140 for internet, and cable is just a decoy. The bundle is a shell game. It makes price comparisons impossible. It locks you into long contracts, and it allows them to report to regulators that average internet pricing is lower than it actually is, because they're splitting the cost across multiple line items. Charter Spectrum reported in 2023 that their average internet-only customer pays $75 per month. Sounds reasonable, right? Except only 23% of their customers have internet-only plans. The other 77% are paying an average of $160 for bundles they don't need, subsidizing that lower advertised rate. Step 5. Crush any threat to the model. When Google announced Google Fiber in 2010, a plan to offer gigabit internet in select cities for $70 a month, incumbent providers lost their minds. Suddenly, in cities where Google Fiber was launching, Comcast and AT&T offered speed upgrades and price cuts. In Austin, Texas, before Google Fiber arrived, the fastest Comcast plan was $100 for 50 megabits per second. The moment Google announced Austin as a fiber city, Comcast launched a 250 megabits plan for $70. AT&T matched it. Both companies had the technical capability to offer faster speeds the entire time. They just didn't because they had no reason to. Google Fiber ultimately scaled back their expansion after realizing that incumbent providers had rigged local permitting processes to slow down new infrastructure deployment. In Nashville, Comcast sued to block a city ordinance that would have made it easier for Google to access utility poles. The lawsuit delayed Google Fiber's rollout by over 2 years. The message was clear. Even a company as powerful as Google couldn't break the stranglehold. This is the machine. Control territory, eliminate competitors through mergers, use psychological pricing to hide costs, bundle to obfuscate, crush threats. It's not a business model designed to serve customers. It's a business model designed to extract maximum rent from a captive population, and the numbers prove it. It's not just Japan. Let's look at the evidence wall, because the pattern is global and undeniable. In South Korea, the average internet speed is 200 megabytes per second. The average cost is $28 per month. South Korea achieved this through a government program in the 1990s called the Cyber Korea 21 Initiative. The government built fiber optic infrastructure as a public utility and then leased access to private companies at regulated rates. Result? South Korea now has the second fastest internet on Earth and some of the cheapest prices. Multiple companies compete using the same infrastructure. No monopolies, no territory carving, just actual competition. In Romania, a country with a GDP per capita less than half of America's, you can get 1 gigabit per second fiber internet for $10 per month. How? After the fall of communism, small neighborhood companies started building local fiber networks in apartment buildings. Because there was no incumbent monopoly to fight, hundreds of small ISPs popped up and competed aggressively. The big telecom companies eventually moved in, but by then the competitive market structure was locked in. Bucharest has over 200 internet service providers. Philadelphia has 2. France mandated local loop unbundling in 2002, forcing the dominant telecom company, France Telecom, to let competitors use its infrastructure at cost-based rates. Within 5 years, France went from some of the most expensive internet in Europe to some of the cheapest. Average price today, $35 per month for fiber. In Japan, the government did something even smarter. In 2001, they broke up NTT, Japan's version of AT&T, but they did it differently than the US did. They forced NTT to separate its infrastructure division from its retail service division. NTT East and NTT West own the cables, but they're legally required to lease access to competitors at regulated rates. This created a market where over 200 companies compete to sell you internet using the same physical infrastructure. They compete on price, service quality, and customer support, not on who owns the cables in your street. The result? Tokyo residents choose from dozens of providers. Average prices $30 to $40 for gigabit fiber. Installation is often free. No promotional pricing tricks, no bundles, just actual market competition. But it's not just Asia and Europe. Even Australia, a country with some of the hardest geography to wire on the planet, a massive landmass with low population density, recognized this problem. In 2009, they launched the National Broadband Network, a government-owned infrastructure project designed to create a shared fiber network that any ISP could use. The project has had problems and delays, but the structure is sound. Separate infrastructure from service, mandate open access, regulate prices. Australia's average broadband cost is now $60 per month, still higher than Europe or Asia, but significantly cheaper than the United States, despite having far worse geography. The pattern is consistent across every developed nation that has cheap, fast internet. They separated infrastructure from service. They treated cables like public utilities. They forced incumbents to share. They created actual competition. The United States did the opposite. And American companies didn't just stop at dominating the domestic market. Here's a fact that should make your blood boil. Comcast operates in multiple European markets under the brand Virgin Media O2 in the United Kingdom. In the UK, where they face actual competition and stricter regulation, Virgin Media offers 500 megabits per second internet for around £40 per month, roughly $50. The same company charges Americans $110 for the same speed. They know how to offer better service at lower prices. They do it in other countries where the law requires it. They simply choose not to in America because they don't have to. But here's the plot twist that changes everything. The monopoly on cables? That's not even the most profitable part anymore. The real money now is in data caps and overage fees. Starting around 2013, internet providers started quietly introducing data caps, limits on how much data you could use per month before getting charged extra. Comcast set theirs at 1.2 terabytes. Cox set theirs at 1.25 terabytes. Mediacom went even lower, 1 terabyte. They claimed this was about network management and preventing a few heavy users from slowing down the network for everyone else. But here's the thing. Data caps don't reduce congestion. Congestion happens when too many people use the network at the same time, during peak hours. A data cap measures total volume over a month, which has nothing to do with peak hour congestion. It's like an electric company charging you extra if you use too much electricity in a month, even if you only use it at 3 a.m. when nobody else is using power. It makes no technical sense. What data caps actually do is create a new profit center. Most people don't hit the cap, so they tolerate it. But as streaming video became the norm, 4K Netflix, YouTube, Zoom calls, cloud gaming, more households started hitting limits. Comcast charges $10 for every 50 gigabytes you go over the cap, or you can pay $30 per month for unlimited data. In 2022, analysts estimated that Comcast made over $1.2 billion from data cap overage fees and unlimited upgrades. That's pure profit. It cost them nothing to remove an artificial limit they created. And here's the kicker. Comcast doesn't enforce data caps in areas where they face competition from fiber providers. In cities where Verizon Fios or Google Fiber operates, Comcast has conveniently suspended data cap enforcement. In cities where they're the only option, the cap is rigidly enforced. This is the tell. If data caps were really about network management, they'd apply them everywhere. But they're not about networks. They're about rent-seeking, inventing fees for artificial scarcity where no scarcity exists. AT&T does the same thing. Charter Spectrum is one of the few holdouts that hasn't implemented caps yet, but only because they promised not to for 7 years as a condition of their merger approval. That promise expires in 2025. Analysts expect caps to arrive shortly after. This is the second business model layered on top of the first. Control the infrastructure, charge monopoly prices, then invent fake scarcity to charge even more. And the psychology here is brilliant in the most cynical way possible. Most people don't track their data usage. They have no idea if they're close to the cap, so they live with a vague anxiety that they might get hit with fees, which makes paying $30 for unlimited feel like insurance rather than extortion. Meanwhile, the actual cost to the ISP of you using 10 terabytes versus 1 terabyte? Effectively zero. Data transmission costs have fallen by over 90% in the last decade. Carrying your Netflix stream cost them fractions of a cent. Every time you pay your internet bill, you're funding this system. You're paying 5 times what a Tokyo resident pays, not because your service costs more to deliver, but because the company providing it has successfully eliminated competition, captured regulators, and designed a business model around extraction rather than service. And it's not just the money, it's what that money represents. When you're paying $1,800 a year for internet that should cost $400, that's $1,400 that doesn't go into your savings, doesn't go toward your kids' education, doesn't go into the local economy. It goes to shareholders of companies that are already some of the most profitable in the world. Comcast's profit in 2022 was $14.2 billion. Charter made $5.3 billion. AT&T, $15.5 billion. These companies aren't struggling. They're not scraping by. They're extracting wealth from captivity. And because internet access is no longer optional, it's required for work, school, healthcare, government services. You can't just opt out. The monopoly isn't on a luxury. It's on an essential utility. Think about how this shapes everything else. When Americans pay more for worse internet, that affects productivity, it affects education, it affects which businesses can operate and where. Rural areas that can't get affordable high-speed access fall further behind. The digital divide isn't just about access, it's about cost. A family in rural Tennessee might technically have access to internet, but if it costs $120 a month for slow DSL, that's a massive burden on a household earning $45,000 a year. That same family in rural Japan would pay $30 for fiber. This is why the "it's just market forces" argument falls apart. Markets require competition. What we have isn't a market, it's a landlord situation. You don't choose your internet provider the way you choose a restaurant. You take what's available at your address, or you go without. And here's what you can do with this information. Absolutely nothing will change unless the regulatory structure changes. You can't boycott. You can't shop around. You can't individually negotiate. The system isn't designed to respond to consumer pressure because consumers have no leverage. What you can do is recognize the game. Understand that your high bill isn't your fault. It's not because you picked the wrong plan or failed to negotiate. It's because the system is designed exactly this way, and it's working as intended, just not for you. So why is your internet bill 5 times higher than in Japan? Because 40 years ago, the United States made a choice. Japan, South Korea, France, Romania, they chose to treat internet infrastructure like the railroad tracks or the electrical grid, a shared resource, a public good that private companies could use but not own exclusively. America chose the opposite. We let private companies own the infrastructure, ban competitors from using it, and charge whatever they wanted. We called it deregulation and free market innovation. What we got was the most expensive internet in the developed world and some of the slowest speeds. We got companies with 93% profit margins extracting $1,800 a year from families who have no alternative. We got a system that's so calcified, so captured, that even Google couldn't break into it. Your internet bill isn't high because of geography or technology or market forces. It's high because someone decided it should be, and no one with power has decided to stop them. Every month when you pay that bill, you're not paying for internet. You're paying rent to a landlord who owns the only road to your house. And until the road becomes public infrastructure that anyone can use, that rent will keep going up, because it can. The difference between Tokyo and New York isn't technology. It's not population density. It's not corporate efficiency. It's a choice about who owns the future and who pays for it.